What makes most women start a business? Is it passion, money, or freedom? Welcome to the Female Founders, the podcast that takes you behind the scene with women who are founders and CEOs to help you start and scale a successful business of your own. I am your host, Andrea De La Cerda. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Female Founders. Today I will have a conversation with Andrea De La Cerda. Andrea is the founder and CEO of the Clover agency and Kandula Communications, with over 25 years of experience in advertising, marketing, and communications. Good morning, Andrea. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about communications and everything else you have been doing, including the Clover agency. But my first question for you, let's go back. What inspired you to start the Clover agency and Kandula Communication, and how do they implement each other?
Yeah, great question. Actually, I started the Clover agency. Yesterday was our 13th anniversary. Whoa. We started it on St. Patrick's Day 13 years ago. So that was very exciting. But before owning the Clover agency, I had started many businesses. I think I'm just sort of a natural visionary. When I was 22, I started businesses. Some of them were moderately successful. Some of them were not successful at all. And I just found myself with this new, fresh idea, I would just launch it. I would just lean into it. Yeah. I mean, many of your listeners might be listening and have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit too. It's sort of something that sometimes I think you're just born with. And I had that. But I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. I learned how you would get a business license. I went through kind of the exercise of doing that. I learned that. I did it again. Then I did it again. But what I learned when I finally got to the point with Clover of starting my own consultancy, I'd never had a consultancy before. I had done other things, but this was always something that I dreamed of. I had gone to school for communications and advertising, and I thought if I could have my own agency, what an amazing gift that would be. Not only would my kids be able to see me do something that's, within my bailiwick, that's something that I'm passionate about, but I would also get to pick and choose who I was working with, right? That's such an amazing gift. And my children were really young at the time. So it was always a struggle. This is pre-COVID days. Not too many people had the opportunity to remotely work. It was just not something that was done. And so I really was trying to figure out a way to have this work-life balance. How can I feel like I'm contributing? How can I feel like I'm contributing also to myself so that I have something I can fall back on? God forbid something happens in my life and I need to make my own money. What will that look like for me? And how can I do that while also being a really good mom? And so I sort of leaned into the Clover agency as sort of this way of how can I now take my entrepreneurial spirit and create the life I really want, the life I really love. But it was hard. My margins were really thin in the beginning. I was hiring experts, on certain projects that sometimes they were video projects, sometimes they were graphic design or large environmental visual signage projects. So I needed different SMEs. I needed to hire experts for these things, and they're expensive. And I wasn't able, when I was just getting started, I wasn't able to offer them ongoing work with me because I didn't have that many projects yet. So I was really operating on narrow margins and thought, I don't know how I can do this for very long without quitting again. And that's when I kind of started to pay attention a little bit to my own mindset and my own behaviors. As I'm leaning into these different businesses, I get it to a certain place. And then when things get too hard, I back out. And I think it forced me to be really honest about myself and about really what I wanted. Because if I had all the tools at that point, I had all the education, I had done it before, but the mindset was the only thing that I had not shifted. And the minute I did that, everything changed for me. And I was then, now we have a business that's profitable. Then that gave us the extra money to be able to reinvest back into innovation and new ideas. And now we're cooking with gas, right? Because as a visionary, and you yourself, I'm sure, are as well. Yes. I mean, you have those new ideas to not feel like you're able to act on them because you don't have the resources or, you don't have the support. It's constricting as a visionary, because that's all you really want to do is go out there and create something new. So having, that profitable business, now we had a little bit of that to reinvest. And then that's when Kandula Communications was born, because we realized that what our mission was so big that to put it all under one company didn't make sense in some ways. So we separated them, and the two companies work in partnership together. They're still very strong channel partners for one another. The Clover Agency's mission is in workforce development, really focusing on underserved populations and helping them get jobs. So, for example, in the Central Valley in California, we work with rural farm workers, English language learners, people who don't speak English as they're not their native language, and sometimes that can get in the way of them getting a good job, a livable wage. And so we step in and we support, we partner with educational institutions, sometimes workforce development agencies. We partner with them to make sure these individuals have that one-on-one support they need in order to graduate with that certification and then move into get the resume writing skills. We do mock interviews. We help prepare them for what it is that they need to do in order to get that job and be successful. But we also work with the employers and we help educate them on what to expect. Because, in order for them to be successful, sometimes we have to educate them to open up their minds to individuals that maybe they would have passed over before, encouraging them not to pass over them again. And another community that we're very passionate about is the formerly incarcerated and justice involved individuals. So we really, when we work one-on-one in a case management basis with them once they come out of incarceration, we're really helping them get connected to all of the resources in the community that they're entitled to and that they're eligible for. So things like housing, transportation, making even childcare, making sure that, we can handle some of these difficulties as they pop up. Coming out of prison is a very, very difficult experience and very anxiety ridden for so many people. And so by supporting in some of those areas, we're helping them focus on what's most important. And that's reentry into the community really in a successful way and getting a job and a livable wage so they can make a difference. So that's what we do on the Clover side. But all of this great work needs sort of a platform. It needs a megaphone. And so that's where Kandula Communications comes in and helps support that organization and really telling these stories. It's really inspiring when we see many of the men and women that come out of our programs whose life has been changed. They really feel hope, sometimes for the first time. Some individuals are coming out on parole, and some had sentences for decades, some life sentences, and they're out now, not ever knowing that they would ever be out again. Yeah. How do you empower those individuals to not go back, but to create a new life for themselves? And so we do that. When we do that successfully and we're able to share those stories, it's so empowering, inspiring, not just for those with lived experience, but for all of us. All of us, we live in this community together. So it feels good. It feels like good work.
At the beginning, you said that you started many businesses before in your 20s. And when you're saying that I was smiling, is the fact that I did the exact same thing. I was raised by a family business. My grandparents were farmers. Of course, when you farm, you need to sell the food. And my mom used to always have her own stores and sell things. And that's me, was always traveling with my mom in business. And then as a kid, I remember the first thing I did was selling my food in school because I didn't like eating breakfast and lunch. And until today, I still don't. And that's a big issue for me. My doctor was pushing me for that. I don't eat breakfast. I don't eat lunch. I eat one meal, which is dinner. And what I will do is my mom will pack the food and tell the teacher that to remind me to eat. But instead, during lunchtime or breakfast, when we get to school, I will tell the kids that I have the food for sale and I will sell it for a penny. I didn't get caught until I was about 8 years old. When I get caught doing it.
Wow.
And then when the
That's
teacher
a good
asked
run.
me,
That's a very good run.
The teacher asked me what I was doing, and I was like, would you like to buy some food? It's 25 cents. The price went up this year. And then they called my mom in, and my mom took me with her that day and took me back to her boutique. And she said, if you like it so much, you could just tell me. You could just just handle that all day long. And when we got home, my mom said, "Can you show me what you've been doing with all that money?" And I went under the bed and I get that big full of pennies and 10 cents and I give it to her. She's like, "That's a lot of money you've been hiding for all this time." But that was me. So I was doing that, and then I saw so many different businesses just like you. I failed. Some of them did well, like selling food at school. That did well for a few years. Some didn't work out at all, and I think that's a perfect example, Andrea, for women. The fact that we are not going to succeed all the time. We are going to fail. But don't look at failure as something like, I fail and I give up. Just like you did with this company, you will go back like, okay, what's missing? And the mindset was that. And once you fix that, the problem fixed, right? Look at it this way, we can go back.
Yeah, it was game changing for me. And I'll have to admit that when I had a business coach first introduce me to this idea of mindset, maybe you need to change your limiting beliefs. Maybe you've got beliefs that are getting in the way. I really dismissed it and thought, no. You don't understand. I've done this before. I've been a business owner. I'm good. Like I really didn't see how I was getting in my own way. And when she encouraged me in a way that was like, look, we all have limiting beliefs. All of us, every human, and particularly women, I think that struggle, with the idea of like subconscious limiting beliefs that kind of sit there and they're not obvious to us necessarily. It's part of our subconscious. It's just how we operate and make decisions. And so when I really learned about what she was sharing with me and how that applied to me, it became very clear when I became more aware of where, for example, things like money. What's your relationship with money? Like everyone's relationship with money is a little different. And a lot of that goes back to our childhood. Yes. What did we see? What did we witness? What was modeled for us? And just that issue alone, it is a can of worms that can open up so many feelings of, well, the money is the root of all evil. More money, more problems. Like these are phrases that have entered into our society and our cultures, and for some of us more than others, and some even as far back as childhood, young years. And so when that hits in our subconscious and it teaches us something at an early age, it can sometimes completely affect our behaviors and how we move forward in life. And not being aware of that was getting in my way. Not being aware was allowing me to quit too soon. Because I'd be like, I guess it's not working. I guess it must be something I'm doing in terms of like tactical things. And it wasn't about the tactical. It wasn't about the how to leverage social media, how to make good relationships. Those things, we have all that. We have the tools, we have the skills. But there's something more. There's something bigger that sometimes keeps us from doing the thing that we know we need to do.
And we just have to figure out what it is. Instead of looking at it as, I failed, didn't work out. Next, instead of doing
and that. And then quitting, right? And then quitting, because I try to think of it now as everything's an education. And I'm a big proponent of education, right? So if it doesn't quite go in the direction I expected or wanted it to, well, it's an education in something. I learned something about myself. I learned something about the market. I learned something about consumer behavior. I learned something.
You learned something from it, yes. And I think a lot of us, we don't have the patience, I have to say. I think a lot of women that over for the past almost 10 years that I've been talking to, I think one of them is the fact that they are married, right? They have children, and then they quit their job, decided to start a company, and the husband is expecting them to bring money in to help with the family. And they are in so much, I will say, pressure.
Oh, yes.
They're carrying that pressure and to bring money. And as soon as they see that something is missing for them, okay, I failed, this is not working, I'm just going to go get a full-time job and I'm done. I'm not saying don't do that, but you might want to kind of like you say, Andrea, kind of lay it down, see what went wrong. And sometimes too, like you did, you spoke with the coach. Yeah, the coach took a while for the coach to get to you, but maybe reach out for help, what I did wrong here. And I think the most part is don't call it a failure. something to learn from.
Yeah. It's a growth opportunity. And I think that communities like yours are so important because it allows women to see that they're not alone in this journey either. It can be because owning a business, if you choose to go that way, or even not, like just choosing to work for a company, it can be with all the pressure on us, all the responsibilities that we face at home. It can feel isolating. It can feel like I'm the only one dealing with all of this. I am on my last rope. I don't know how I'm going to do this long term, and feeling like you're the only one. And that's not true. And we live in a community of women who at some point have felt those same feelings and those same frustrations. So it's a real nice grounding, kind of a grounding into like in perspective and support. It's difficult.
But with over 25 years of experience in advertising, marketing, and communication, what moments in your career shape your approach to branding and storytelling?
Sorry, I didn't hear you on that one, Nageli.
So what moments in your career shape your approach to branding and storytelling?
So what points in my career made me lean into branding?
Yes, like what was that moment that said, hey, branding and storytelling is a key thing when it's come to businesses?
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry. You can ask me that one again. We can cut that part out.
It's okay. So you have over 25 years of experience in advertising, marketing, and communication. So what moments in your career shape your approach to branding and storytelling?
So, well, this is an interesting story because when I was in college, I learned about all of these different communication majors. And I didn't know that they existed before. Things like telecommunications and graphic design and advertising and public relations. And so I thought advertising seemed really sexy. This is also like the mid 1990s. So big Super Bowl commercials. Think about like before digital ads. Like it was really glamorous. And so I thought that sounds fun. And I pursued advertising. I started in some of the big agencies down in Los Angeles. I worked on Honda for a while, Nestle, some other big companies. And I had a lot of fun. I will say that when I first told my parents that I was going to change my major to advertising, my mom cried tears. She was so embarrassed that I would consider like a job, like to be a professional liar. She was like, "You just want to be a professional liar? This is what you all you want to do?" And I said,
"I wonder why she thinks that."
I think some people do have this perception advertising is, a little bit gimmicky and maybe, not honest. And I didn't see it that way. I saw it as a way to tell a story and in a way that people will pay attention, or in a challenging way to tell a story, because you have to tell it in a really short period of time. You have to be really super creative. You got to grab people's attention with something current in pop culture. You got to figure out how to do it. So I thought it sounded really interesting. My mom cried. She said, "You're going to be just a professional liar." And what am I going to tell my friends? And so I filed that. I still went forward. I had a career in advertising, which it was very challenging. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of the things that I expected it to be. However, continuing down in my career after having children and, had to make the decision whether I was going to go back into an advertising job after that. And those jobs can be really competitive. There's only so many spots for a lot of people. And so they're really looking for young people who are willing to burn the midnight oil, like sleep under your desk if you need to, work those late hours, work those weekends. And I wasn't really in a place anymore that I was willing to do that. And I had done that, and I wasn't willing to do that anymore. But the world of social media was opening up at the time. This was about 2007, 2008. Twitter is now in its beta phase.
MySpace, I think.
MySpace. So there were some platforms out there that were, that were big, but then you had the big ones who were just emerging. The Facebooks and the Twitters that were just kind of coming on board. And I remember thinking about that a lot. And it was just for fun. I wasn't getting paid at the time to do it, but I was just I created a blog for fun. I wanted to kind of see, what is this world? What does this new world, social world look like? It was Twitter's beta phase, and I remember putting something out. Back then, Twitter was just like one giant universe. Everybody was following everybody at the time. And so I put something out there, something silly about taking my kids to Taekwondo practice or something silly like that. And I immediately got all of these responses from people like, oh, I did Taekwondo as a kid. Oh, that sounds like fun. I mean, people who were like, I didn't know. I thought, whoa, that is wild. And so then that got me thinking there's a real opportunity here to tell stories in a way that, that doesn't have to be in this 30-second, television format. And that sounded cool. And also it opened the playing field for everyone. You didn't have to have $1 million to buy that 30-second spot. You could reach anyone and also receive back from them something. You could hear their perspective. And I was fascinated by it. And so that's when I really started to lean more into storytelling and really communications more broadly, because now, strategic communications can include any type of medium you can imagine. And I really wanted to dive into all of it.
Like when you were talking about earlier that you have people that's coming out of prison and you have people with language barriers. So what are all the things that you see in the job market right now that's people are struggling with to get a good career going? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different things happening. What we're seeing is certainly in the underserved communities, which is where we focus our attention. We need to get them sometimes the skills that they need, sometimes the language that they need, and in some cases, get them the support like housing, transportation, the financial support so that they can go and take the time to go look for that job. But if they're coming out of incarceration, for example, there's certainly employers who won't even consider hiring them just for that reason. We're really trying to advocate for a different way, advocate for second chances, advocate for providing people the opportunity to prove that they've gone away, they've done their time, and they're back and they're ready to make a contribution. So what we see really is a divide. We see a divide between the educational institutions and sometimes the government institutions and the employers themselves and what the employers are expecting and looking for. So we sit in the middle and we don't necessarily lean toward one direction or the other, but what we do is try to understand both sides, really understanding what the participants need, what some of the nonprofit organizations that are providing support and resources, what are their expectations and how are they operating? And does that make sense for the marketplace? Does that make sense in the same ecosystem as for-profit employers and what for-profit employers are expecting to get out of the workforce? So I think it's just it's an opportunity really that we're seeing a lot of these gaps and a lot of bridges that need to be built between these individual groups. And so we are really leveraging strategic communication to be able to do that, for good, helping to change people's opinion or getting them to think twice about what the benefits might be of second chance hiring. Why have they been doing it this way all for so many years, decades? Is there a way to do it now that's different? Is that still even relevant today? Yeah. It's important. If employers are needing skilled employees and are not seeing enough of those skilled employees applying for open positions, then we need to think differently. We need to think differently about how we connect those who need those jobs and have the skills to the employers who need them.
But why do you choose to support underdeserved communities? There's other things you could have done with all your experiences.
Well, but I think that's part of it is, there's been a lot of years of experience selling automobiles, selling dog food. Did that for a while. Sold candy bars. Who else did I work for? Storage units. Sold marketing technology to help companies make more money. All that is fine. That's part of our capitalist society and our commerce, and it keeps the world. All of that is great. But I think having done all of that and got into a place in my career where I thought, I'm ready for a new challenge. And that challenge is not necessarily how to be a marketer, because I know how to do that after many years. But the challenge is more of how do you solve big problems? How do you use communication to solve really difficult problems? And this is and who needs it more than in the job market today? We hear a lot about how it's falling short. Well, let's then look at huge populations of people who don't have work and want it.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like a way that we can kind of solve for many things at once if we can solve that. But it's a really difficult nut to crack. It's a huge challenge, and it's something that I love because of the challenge and because of the also just what you're able to provide to these individuals that they didn't have before. So I think what keeps me going and keeps me really plugged into the work is that when my teams will send over videos that participants have done, thanking us for everything. Like, I can't believe how different my life is than it was before. And so, I mean, when you hear these testimonials right from them, not
you're
unsolicited, right? It feels good. It feels like doing good work. Not that selling cars and dog food is not good work. It's good work, but it's all good work. But it feels so rewarding today to be able to not just do the work, but lead the team and also mobilize and encourage the team around doing such something that's just so beneficial to so many people.
But here's a question for you. Let's say you have someone that's been in prison for 10, 20 years that's getting out now. So how do your company connect with people like that to actually support them? And not only that, where do you find the funding to even provide that type of services to them?
Yeah, so we operate not exclusively, but a lot of the funding that we receive is public funds. So we'll receive a grant from the state, sometimes a grant from the Department of Labor, and we'll write those grants and we'll kind of plan out the project in the grant application, and then we have to wait, right? We have to wait to see if we were awarded the grant, and when we are, and we have a pretty high success rate on our grant writing. When we're awarded it, that's when we mobilize the team. It's not just our organization. Usually we team up with other community-based organizations that are in the area, sometimes with the parole department or others that are going to be important to be able to work with, because we can't do it alone. We can't do any of these projects alone in the communities that we serve. In terms of how we connect with them individually, we have case managers who are on the ground in those locations who really understand the ecosystem in that local community and also have the clearances that are necessary in the prison system to be able to access the different buildings and places that need to access. So that connection, we usually know ahead of when they're released, who's going to be released in about the approximate time so that we can kind of prepare. And then when they're out, we make sure that we connect with them. And then from there, if they have an interest in sticking with our program, then we provide the support that they need in order to do that. But it takes a village. It's not just one organization. Yeah. Even our two organizations together cannot do this work alone. Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of work. So does that mean that your case managers meet with them in person, or is it like schedule everything online? They kind of meet online, or do they need to also meet certain type of because they are part of your program? They need to follow certain things to be qualified for certain things, and like for example, like when you're in payroll, if you don't do certain things, you can go back to jail.
Right. So our case managers are trained, and there's certain, depends on where they're going to be working directly. But there's sometimes there are clearances that they need to make sure that they have. And to your question about whether they're in person, yes. And so that's again why background checks and clearances are important for them to make sure that we have, so that they can have that level of access. Now, your question about virtual is something that we've been considering, because if you take this idea, of course, as a visionary, this is things I think about. We have case managers who are very effective on the ground in these local areas, connecting one-on-one. Is that scalable these days? I don't know. I hope so. Or is there a way our case managers can virtually provide the same level of support? I'm not sure. We haven't really done it yet. but there might be a time when it would make sense. Right now, so far, our projects are pretty localized to a pretty specific area. And so our case managers know that neighborhood, they know the area well, they know the resources available to connect participants with. And so it's been working.
So for right now, do you only provide the services in California? Or it's anywhere within the United States?
So great question. It's currently been in California, but we have great appetite to more broadly serve participants, communities in other states. There really isn't any reason why we need to stay local to California anymore. I mean, I think we've built this logic model that is getting funded. It makes sense. We're now operationalizing that in a way that is beginning to make sense. We're having success. And now it's a matter of scaling that much, further. So yeah, we're happy to take on, interested parties or have conversations, with people that, have an interest in other states for sure.
Looking back in your journey as an entrepreneur, you have done so much and learned from your success, your failures. We shouldn't call them failures. We should call them success because you learned something from them, right? So what are some lessons you have learned that you wish you knew earlier?
Oh my gosh. The mindset exercises that I have done, and I'll be honest, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 plus years, and I'm really only leaning into this over the last 3 or 4. But it's in those 3 or 4 years that I have seen such a dramatic increase in what we're able to accomplish, both on how much the companies are able to generate in terms of gross revenue, and also how much we're able to actually achieve when it comes to the vision. It used to be I would like dream of these, I'd have these visions of my business and it would just be a dream. I'd think, well, that's a nice thought.
Yeah.
Or yeah, that would be really cool, but there was always a but. There was always a reason why I couldn't do it now. Now, the mindset is, to me, that's the secret sauce. That's the secret sauce. And I didn't know, and I think any women out there who are listening to this who need some encouragement, if you've ever been to that place where you're like, oh, I have this idea. Oh, I don't think anybody's doing this. It'd be so cool if someone would do X, Y, and Z. Do it. Figure out a way to, even on a side, do it. Even spend a little time researching it. Do it. And if there are thoughts getting in your way, be really honest with yourself. If you're starting to think, well, I would love to do it, but there's a but in there. That's a sign. So there's probably some mindset work to be done. I've tried so many different modalities too, if anybody needs ideas. I mean, I've done, and I mean, EFT, CBT, there's NLP, what else have I done? Body code. I mean, there's so many different types of modalities to help encourage you to kind of be aware of what where your subconscious might be getting in the way. So there's help out there, there's support. It's not nothing I offer, but I certainly happy to recommend individuals if people need a resource, because sometimes you can't do that on our own. Sometimes we need a little coaching through some of those limiting beliefs.
Right. So what advice would you give to women looking to build a successful career in communication or start their own agency?
So, oh, wow. I feel like this is such an exciting time to do that. Some people might think, well, AI is coming on. What do we need communication agencies for anymore if we have AI? I take a different perspective on that. This is the time for communication agencies to really show up, because there's never, first of all, communication is that connection between one person and another, one entity and another, right? At the end of the day, we're just human. We're human beings who want to make those genuine connections. AI is a tool to be able to allow us to do that faster, more effectively, more creatively than ever before. But it's never, ever going to replace the actual connection between one human and another human. That will always be important since the beginning of time, since the cavemen, since before that, all we ever wanted to do was connect. with each other. And telling stories around the campfire goes back thousands of years. And this is a new way of thinking about that. This is a new generation of what storytelling looks like. So if you have an interest, and if you're holding back because of that, because you're not sure there's going to be enough work out there for you, because you think companies can just use AI and they won't need to use you, I don't think that's true.
It's not.
Mm-mm.
Can't
and so now more than ever, lean in.
Yes. So how can anyone reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can find me on our website, KandulaCommunications.com, and that's with a K, Kandula Communications. And you can also find me in more of a coaching offering that we're launching this year that I'm super, super excited about. And they can go to adlc.com or AndreaDelaCerda.com, which is my name. And they can find more information about what some of our coaching offerings are, which is really supporting entrepreneurs in kind of that beginning phase where they're like, I don't really know. I mean, I have this idea, but maybe I'll do it someday. Well, someday is today. And we're here to support a community of women to grow into themselves as entrepreneurs and be truly successful, really be able to make your own money, lots of it, feel safer in the world because you make money and lots of it. And I believe that every woman who wants that should have it.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Well, Thank you so much, Andrea, for giving me that chance to have this conversation with you and for sharing your knowledge. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Female Founders Podcast. That's it for this week's episode. Be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app or connect with us on womel.com so that you don't miss our next episode. See you next time. Bye for now.